about that. Okay. Yeah. Hey, Olive. One may throw produce through a trapdoor on Yom Tov, but not on Shabbos, and one may cover produce with utensils because of dripping rain. And so, also jars of wine and jars of oil, and one may place a utensil under the dripping pan, rain on Shabbos. Whenever one is liable for because of shivui, because of reshut, because of a mitzvah on the Sabbath, one is liable for Yom Tov. These are because of shivut, when one may not climb a tree, ride on an animal, swim in the water, clap, slap, or dance. And these are because of reshut, when we may not judge, betroth, perform chalitza, and a yibum. And these are because of mitzvah. One may not dedicate, make a valuation vow, and may not devote anything, or may not take truma and maisa. They stated all these reports in respect to Yom Tov and all the more on the Shabbos. There's no differentiation between Shabbos and Yom Tov except for food. The animal and the utensils are the owner's feet. If one gives over his animal to his son or a shepherd, they are as the owner's feet. Utensils which are for the particular use of one of the brothers in the house are his feet, and those are not for his particular use may go where they walk. Okay,
Okay,
good.
so carrying on the theme of utensils and and people who've got different techumin. Hashoel kli mechavero me'erev Yom Tov. If somebody borrows anything, any utensil from his friend before Yom Tov comes in, karagli hashoel, then the kli, even though it's in the ownership of somebody else, whoever has the right to use it on Yom Tov is the one who determines where its tchum is. So if he made an Erev Techumin and he wants to carry it to the neighboring town, then he's allowed to do that. Um, but if he borrows it on Yom Tov, Be Yom Tov, Keragle Hamashil, then it still belongs to the owner, and the borrower cannot take it beyond where the owner would be allowed to go. האישה ששאלה מחברתה תבלין ומים ומלח לעיסתה. So she goes to her neighbor to borrow ingredients to make bread. She makes some bread, right? You can do that on Yom Tov. But now the ingredients that she took from her neighbor are as her feed now. And if this woman made an Erev Techumin, then since she has a share in the bread, since part of the ingredients came from somebody else, so now the total the bread cannot move beyond the intersection of their two Venn diagrams. Of their two techumin. That's where the bread is allowed to go because both of them have a share in the bread, basically. Rabbi Yehuda poter b'mayim mipnei she'ein bahen mamish. Interesting that Rabbi Yehuda says that water has no mamashas, maybe because it has no taste, but you're not making bread without water. And I think that's what the Chachamim say back to Rabbi Yehuda, because the halacha does not follow him. The water is considered mamash in the halacha, but Rabbi Yehuda says it's not considered anything in
Well, the
particular.
comment here it says because there's nothing substantial in it, but you can't have the kala without the water.
Right, right.
That makes it substantial.
So
So,
I guess that is the argument between them, and the halacha follows the Tanna Kamma that water does have it is considered a substantial addition to the bread. Okay. Hagacheles kiragle ba'alim. If you're carrying around a coal on Yom Tov, v'shal heves b'chol makom. So the coal is according to the feet of the owner. So whoever owned the coal when Yom Tov came in, that's if you want to carry the coal around with you to make a fire somewhere else or to just keep you warm wherever you're going. That just like any other object is based on whoever owned the coal on Erev, as Yom Tov came in. But the flame is not considered substantial, and the flame can be transferred. Perhaps because it's such an ephemeral thing, and it moves, and you can light something else from the flame. So the flame is not considered like an object that belongs to somebody, and therefore it doesn't matter who created the flame. You can transfer it, you can move it, you can take it somewhere else. Okay. Gacheles shel hekdesh moalin ba v'shel heves lo ninin v'lo moalin. So while we're talking about the flame and the coal, so the coal is a substantial thing, and if it belongs to hekdesh, then it's possible to commit me'ilah with it. If you use a coal of hekdesh for your own personal purposes, then you have to bring a korban me'ilah. So you have to pay back the um
Right, right.
The original amount, the keren v'chomesh, you have to pay back. But the flame, if you just make use of the flame as opposed to the coal, it's asur. You're not allowed to do it, but there's no din of meila by the flame. Hamotzi gacheles le'rshus harabim chayav. Somebody takes a coal into the rishus harabim on Shabbos. Okay, forget about the muktzah part because obviously the coal is muktzah, but muktzah is din drabanan. Now let's say this coal was on a shovel and well, we know that in order to be chayav for carrying something into the Rishus Harabim, you have to put the whole thing into the Rishus Harabim. So if he picks it up on like a shovel and moves it from the Rishus Yachid into the Rishus Harabim, just the extended piece of the that's holding the coal on it. So the coal he's definitely moved from the Rishus Yachid to the Rishus Harabim. There he'd be chayav. Okay, but Shalheves patur. So if he just put it right by the edge, so that the coal was still in the Rishus Yachid, but now the flame was blowing into the Rishus Rabim, that's not considered anything in particular. He is still patur for doing that. Bor shel Yachid. What if you've got a cistern that's got water in it? Obviously, nobody's moving the cistern, but the water that's in the bore is, and if it belongs to an individual, then anyone who draws water out of there, and wants to carry that water, has to abide by the rule that the water that comes out is like the legs of the owner of the water. Okay, B'shel anshe osa ha'ir. However, if it's a communal well, uh, Karagle Anshe or Saha'ir, then it belongs to the whole city, and therefore it's ki'ilu that the city is its tchum, and you could carry it around the city and 2,000 amas outside of it, just like anyone else in the city mistama. So if you've made an erev techumin, that even if you're a resident of that city, it goes by the majority of the people of the city who are presumably staying in the city. There's an interesting discussion to be had if everyone or the majority of people in the city decided that they wanted to make an Erev Techumin so that they could go to visit a neighboring town over Yom Tov. But Shel Ole Bavel Karagle Hamamale, and this is an interesting one that they made a number of wells around the countryside so that the people who were coming from Babel, people who are out of towners would be able
Right.
to draw water for themselves. And there, it doesn't. That water is considered hefker lagamre, and therefore the water that he draws out can go with him wherever he wants to because it didn't belong to anyone before Yom Tov came in. So there are no restrictions on carrying
But
it.
they mostly made the wells and things like that because the regal going, people going traveling a long
Right,
distance.
right. Exactly. They put it there as a public service.
Right.
Mm. Mishna Vav, Mi shehayu peiros of be'ir acheres. So there's a guy who's got his produce in a different city, which is outside of his own personal tuchum. The erevu b'nei os ha'ir lahavi etzlo mi perasav. So somebody, whether it's a group of people or one other person, doesn't really matter. But other people who live in his town decided that they were going to make an erev techumin that would enable them to reach the other town, which happens to be where his produce is. So, so Fred is the guy who's got the produce, and he's sitting in his town, and he didn't make an eruv techumin. But Joe, his friend, says, "Listen, Fred, I've made an eruv techumin. I can go to your town and bring you your produce." And the answer is nope. Lo yaviu lo. They cannot do that because since Fred himself cannot access his payros, then Joe cannot pick up Fred's payros and move them because they're outside of his tuchum. Bim erev hu payrosav kamohu. But if Fred himself joined on with the erev, even if he didn't go, then Joe can go and bring his payros back to him.
Okay.
Okay,
Right.
so we're going to
Where are
finish
we going?
Beitza tomorrow and then Rosh Hashanah.
Rosh Hashanah tomorrow. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I get such a kick out of you and someone else that always use the English names like Joe and Fred and Tom. I'm not used to saying like Chaim Yonkel or something, I just
Reuven and
listen to
Shimon, yeah, I know.
I just get a kick out of them. Listen. Okay. All right. We're on to Sukkah. sukkah, and we have base hay. Beis Shammai says a person may not heat up water for his feet unless it is to be drunk, but Beis Hillel permits it, and a person may make a fire and warm himself before it. In three matters, Rabbi Gamliel is more stringent, following the view of Beit Shammai. One may not cover a pot food from Yom Tov or the Sabbath, and one may not assemble a candelabrum on Yom Tov. And one may not break bread in large loaves, but only in thin cakes. Rabbi Gamliel said, "Never in my father's house did they make bread in large loaves, only in thin cakes." They said to him, "What should we do about your father's house?" To apply the stringent ruling to themselves, but the lenient ruling to all Israel, so that they make bread in large and thick cakes. He also said three things applying to a lenient ruling. One may sweep between the couches, one may put the spices on the fire on Yom Tov, and one may prepare a kid mulugas on the eve of Passover, but the sages forbid this.
Okay.
Okay.
Hey, Yama. Hey, Zion.
And, hey, Zion. The entire Yom Kippur service has been listed in sequence. If he advanced one service before another, he's accomplished nothing. For example, if he advanced the he-goat's blood before the ox's blood, he must again sprinkle from the he-goat's blood after sprinkling the ox's blood. If the blood spilled before he finished the applications of the blood inside, he must bring other blood and must again sprinkle inside from the beginning. The same is true for the sprinkling of the holy, and the same applies to the sprinkling of the golden altar, because each of them is a separate unit of atonement. But Eleazar and Shimon say, from where he broke off is where he starts again. The two he-goats of Yom Kippur, it is preferable that they are alike in color, in height, and in price, and in their purchase, which should be together. But even if they are not alike, they are valid, and if he brought one today and one tomorrow, they're still valid. If one of them died, and if it died before he cast the lots, he must buy a mate for the second one. But if it died after he cast the lots, he must bring another pair. And he casted lots upon them anew, and he is to say if that of Hashem died, but the person upon which the lot for Hashem fell in its place, and that of the Azel died, he says, let the one upon which the lot for Azel fell in its place. Then the second one, he goes to grace until it becomes effective, when it may be sold and proceeds used for donations to a communal sin, as sin offering is not left to die. Rabbi Yehuda says it should be left to die. Rabbi Yehuda said also, if the blood of the he-goat for Hashem spilled, then the one designated to be sent away to Azel is left to die. If the one which was to be sent away died, and the blood of the he-goat for Hashem must be poured out. Okay.
One more.
Right? And he then came to the he-goat designated to be sent away to Azel, and he supports both of his put both of his hands on confesses. And this is what he would say. I beg of you, Hashem, your nation, the family of Israel, acted wickedly, rebelled, and sinned before you. I pray with your name. Forgive now the wicked act, rebellions, and the sins for your people. The family of Israel has acted wickedly, rebelled, and sinned before you, as is written in the Torah of your servant Moses. For on this day I shall return for you to purify you. Before Hashem, you shall be purified. Kohanim and the people who were standing in the courtyard, when they heard the Bible name of coming out of the Kohen Gadol's mouth, they would kneel and prostrate themselves and fall upon their faces and say, blessed is the name and the glory of his kingdom forever and ever.
Ba-da-dum, ba-da-dum, ba-da-dum.
Erevin. Okay. Erevin. We have Aleph Vav. The poles on which they spoke, the height is 10 fists, whether width and thickness are any size. But Yossi says the width is 3 fists. We may use anything as poles, even a living being, but Reb Yossi forbids this. And it transmits tumor contamination as a tomb cover, but when Reb Meir considers it uncontaminated, and we may write bills of divorce on it, but Reb Yossi Agili invalidates it. A caravan which made camp in a valley and surrounded with animal trappings, they may carry within it, provided that the barricade is 10 feet high and the gaps do not exceed the walled portion. Any gap any gap, I lost where I was. What happened here? I lost where I was. All right, so I'm still on Zion. We may use anything as poles, even a living being, but Yabrosi forbids this. And a tumor contamination is a tomb cover. The Rameh considers it uncontaminated, and we may write bills of divorce on it, but Yossi Hagilia invalidates it. A caravan which made camp in a valley and surrounded with animal trappings, they may carry within it, provided that the barricade is 10 feet high and the gaps do not exceed the walled portion. And any gap which is 10 cubits wide is permitted for it as an entrance greater than it is as prohibited. Right? Which is prohibited as an entrance. Right. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. I lost that. Okay. There we go. Okay, Peah. Peah, Dalad Yud. What is Leket? that which falls down during the weeping. If while reaping a person reaped a handful, plucked a fistful, if a thorn struck him and it fell from his hand to the ground, then this is the owner's. Inside the hand and inside the sickle for the poor. Behind the hand and behind the sickle for the owner. The top of the hand and the top of the sickle for Michelle says for the poor, and Kiva says for the owner. Handholds among the standing corner of the owners, those after the reapers. The upper ones are for the pair, the lower ones are for the owners. And the mayor says all are for the poor, but doubtful leket is leket. And a heap under which leket has not been gathered, whatever touches the ground belongs to the poor. If the wind scattered the sheaves, they assessed it, how much leket would it yield, and it gives to the poor. Then Mishna says, gives to the poor as much as usually falls. Okay. Yeah. And now on to Pinum. Okay. Gimel Gimel. If there was a katos bird for this woman and an ola bird for this one, which mingled together, if the Kohen offered all of them above the red line, half of the pair is valid and half is invalid. If he offered all of them below the red line, half of the pair is valid and half is invalid. If he offered half of the pair above the red line and half below the red line, both are invalid because I can say that the katos was one offered above and the ola was the one offered below. If there was a chatos bird and an ola bird, as well as an undesignated pair and a designated pair, if he made all of them above the red line, half of these pairs is valid and half of these pairs, half of each of these pairs is invalid. If he made all of them below the red line, half of these pairs is valid and half of each of these pairs is invalid. If he made half of them above the red line and half of them below the red line, none is valid except for the undesignated pair and the pair that is divided between them. If katos birds mingle with obligatory birds, only the number of katos birds in the obligatory pairs are valid. If the bird offerings in the obligatory pairs were twice as many as the katos birds, half of the offerings are valid and half are invalid. But if the katos birds were twice as many as the bird offerings in the obligatory pair, the number of offerings equal to the number of birds in the obligatory pairs are valid. Similarly, if ola birds mingle with an equal number of bird offerings in the obligatory, only the number of ola birds in the obligatory are valid. If the bird offerings in the obligatory pairs were twice as many as the ola birds, half of the offerings are valid and half are invalid. If the ola birds were twice as many as the bird offerings in the obligatory pair, the number of offerings equal to the number of birds in the obligatory pairs are valid. Okay.
So we're going to finish tomorrow
Right.
and start Kalim.
All right. I got to write this down. I won't remember. Tomorrow is
Rosh Hashanah and Kalim.
Rosh Hashanah and Kalim. Okay. All right.
Oh, and while we're talking about it, we're also doing Bava Basra tomorrow.
Right. Okay. That was an easy one. Okay. Okay. So tomorrow we start with Gimel Vav. Okay. Over here. And Bamamtzia. Okay, Yud Gimel. If a ground floor and upper story belong to the two people collapse, and the owner of the upper story demanded of the owner of the ground floor that it be rebuilt, he refuses. And he refuses, but the owner of the upper story may rebuild the ground floor and live in it until he reimburses him. Rabbi Yehuda says, even if this one who lives in his neighbor's property must pay him rent, rather the owner of the garden may go down and sow his seeds below until the other makes a dome for his olive press. If a ball or tree fell into a public domain and damaged, and he is exempt from paying, if they give him time to cut down the trees to demolish the wall, and they fell within the time, he is exempt. After the time, he is liable. If one's wall abutted another's garden and it fell, and he said to him, clear away your stones, to which the other replied, they are yours, we do not listen to him. After he accepted, he said to him, here, take your expenses, and I will take what belongs to me. We do not listen to him. One hires a laborer to work with him to sow it with straw, and he says to him, give me my wages, to which the other replies, take what you have done for your wages. We do not listen to him. If he accepted, he said to him, take your wages. I will take what belongs to me. We do not listen to him. One who puts manure out in the public domain may do so only if the one who puts it out, and the one who fertilizes immediately. One may not sow clay in the public domain, nor one may bake bricks. The one who needs clay in the public domain does not bricks. One who builds in a public domain may do so only if the one who brings the stones brings, and the one who builds immediately. And if it causes damage, he must pay for the damage. But Shimon Gamil says, even if he prepared his work 30 days before. If there were two gardens, one above the other.
We're done.
All right, so tomorrow we finish this one. Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
All right.